Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking at an island, but not just as a place. We're analyzing it more like a document that's been written on over and over again for millennia. We're diving into Sicily.
Exactly. And the central idea here, the one that unlocks everything, is the palimpsest.
Right.
Yeah.
If you're not familiar with the term, just imagine an old piece of parchment. It was valuable. It was expensive.
So you wouldn't just throw it away. Monks would scrape off the old text and write something new right on top.
But if you look really, really closely, you can still see the faint traces of what was there before. The old layers are still visible.
And that metaphor is the entire focus of the very intense self-directed curriculum we've been analyzing for you. It's a 15-week journey called the Sicilian Palimpsest.
So our mission with this deep dive is to sort of unpack that syllabus. It uses John Julius Norch's book, Sicily, A Short History, as its main guide.
Right, as the narrative spine. And from there, we're trying to extract the most powerful, most memorable nuggets for you. We're looking for those chronological layers.
The Greeks, the Romans, Arabs, Normans, Spanish.
And showing how they didn't just replace each other. They layered, they fused. And that created something, completely unique.
And it's important to say, this curriculum isn't about passing a test. The whole point is self-directed exploration.
Pure curiosity. It's about using free online resources to find that one piece of art, that specific building, or even a single strange word that just sparks something. It's an exercise in intellectual freedom.
And that freedom really starts with the main activity, which is the personal logbook.
Yes, the logbook is key. And it's not for taking notes or summarizing facts. It's meant to be more like a traveler's journal.
So reflections, sketches, maybe trying to write out a few words in another language.
Exactly. It encourages you to use your own hands and your own eyes to process what you're learning. It makes the knowledge personal, not just academic.
Okay, so let's get into the timeline of the curriculum. It begins deep in the past. Week 1 is all about the prehistoric foundation, specifically the necropolis of Pantalica. I found that interesting. Why start there, before the big civilizations even arrive?
Because it immediately throws you into a challenge of, historical forensics.
Yeah.
The curriculum makes you confront what pre-Greek Sicily actually sounded like.
Ah, so you're hunting for the indigenous place names, the toponyms that were there before everyone else showed up.
Precisely. That sense of mystery, of trying to hear the echoes of a lost world.
Yeah.
It just sets the stage perfectly for everything that follows.
And what follows is, monumental, the Greek layer in weeks 2 and 3.
Yeah.
When you go to Sicily, you see these temples that are just as impressive as anything in Greece itself. The curriculum's artistic focus is on the sheer scale of the Doric temples.
Segesta, Agrigento, Solinunte, they are the very definition of a powerful cultural baseline. They established the visual identity of classical Sicily.
But the syllabus pushes you beyond just the temples. It points to the Greek theaters, especially in Syracuse and Taormina.
And that's a smart move, because they weren't just architecture. They were the centers of political and social life. The linguistic task here is pretty simple but effective, just recognizing the basic Greek alphabet.
And seeing how it's still embedded in modern place names, you realize how deep that root really goes.
Yep.
So that sets the stage for the transition for what the curriculum calls the fusion period. Week 4 brings in the Roman and Byzantine echoes.
Right, and the Roman evidence is just spectacular. The focus is on the mosaics at the Villa Romana del Casale in Piazza Armerina.
I've seen pictures. They're incredible.
They're not just decorations. They are sprawling visual encyclopedias of Roman life hunting, mythology, day-to-day scenes, all laid out on the floor.
But you mentioned a Byzantine echo. What's that about?
Well, this is the really fascinating part. You see the early Christian catacombs, and of course there's the impact of Latin legal terms, but the curriculum really emphasizes Koine Greek.
Which wasn't the classical Greek of Plato.
Not at all. Koine was the common dialect. It was the language of trade, of the Eastern Church. It kept flowing from Constantinople, and it maintained this cultural link to the East that even Roman conquest couldn't completely break.
Okay, so let's slow down here, because week 5 introduces a layer that a lot of Western histories tend to gloss over, the golden age of Islam, the Emirate of Sicily.
And the curriculum flags the linguistic takeaway here as being absolutely paramount.
Which is tracking down the surviving Arabic loanwords in modern Sicilian.
It's so important because it shows you where the power really was. It wasn't just, administrative jargon that survived. It was the vocabulary of technology, of infrastructure.
The curriculum points to the word gebbia.
Yes, gebbia. It means an irrigation cistern. Now think about that. That's not some fancy courtly term from a poem.
Yeah.
That's a fundamental piece of technology for survival and farming.
Wait, but wouldn't the next waves of Christian rulers, the Normans, the Spanish, wouldn't they have just wiped out that kind of low-level agricultural word? Why would Jevia stick around?
That's the million-dollar question. And the answer is because the technology the Arabs brought was simply too effective to get rid of, or even to rename.
So it proves the depth of their contribution. They fundamentally changed how the island managed water, how it farmed.
Exactly. When you keep the technique, you often keep the word for it. That one single linguistic fossil tells an entire story about how deep that Arab layer goes. It's not just decorative, it's foundational.
That's fascinating. And that technological base then sets the stage for the absolute climax of this fusion period, the Normans in weeks 6 and 7.
The Normans show up and they impose this strategic military shell over everything. Week 6 is about the sheer solidity of their castles, like the Ziza in Palermo.
And linguistically, you're looking for what?
You're looking for faint, almost spectral traces of Old French or Norman, usually military or administrative terms buried deep in the dialect.
And then comes the absolute peak of the whole story, the syncretic court of Roger II in week 7. This is the Palimpsest in action.
It really is. Artistically, the deep dive zooms in on the Monreale Cathedral mosaics and the interior of the Cappella Palatina. These places are just dazzling.
You see Islamic geometric patterns right next to Byzantine-style icons, all inside a Western Romanesque structure.
Built for a Norman king. But what's so incredible is that the beauty is almost secondary to the statement it's making. Roger II was ruling this incredibly mixed population.
And he used art to show it could work.
He used it to signal tolerance, power, and his own unique cosmopolitan authority. Which leads to the big question the curriculum asks. How did Greek, Arabic, Latin, and Norman speakers actually talk to each other to build these things? How did they collaborate day to day?
The level of linguistic gymnastics must have been insane. And to make sure you really grasp that, there's a key assignment at the end of this week.
The palimpsest synthesis drawing.
Right. It forces you to visually combine these styles. You have to draw something that includes and clearly labels an Arabic element, a Byzantine one, and a Norman one, all integrated together.
Moving on from that Norman high point, we get into the next waves of rulers. Week 8 looks at the often overlooked history of Jewish life in the Judache, the Jewish quarters.
Trying to find traces of Judeo-Italian or Hebrew documentation before the expulsions.
And that leads right into week 9 and the legendary Frederick II, Stupermundi, the wonder of the world.
A huge figure, but his influence was mainly from the Italian mainland, right?
Often, yes. Architecturally, his mark is there, like Castel del Monte. But for this curriculum, his legacy is fundamentally linguistic. Under his court, the Sicilian dialect was elevated. It became the very first literary Italian dialect.
Through the Sicilian School of Poetry.
Exactly. And that's not a small footnote. It means that for a time, the everyday language of the island was considered the most sophisticated, most beautiful language for writing poetry in the entire peninsula.
That's a massive shift. So then we get into the long Spanish period. Week 10 is about Catalan and Aragonese rule. You're looking at Gothic Catalan architecture, tracking some new words coming in.
But it's the Spanish Golden Age, in week 11, that brings a huge, almost theatrical change. And it's driven by tragedy.
The 1693 earthquake.
A devastating earthquake. It just flattened cities across the southeast, the Val di Noto.
And the response was this explosion of rebuilding, the famous Sicilian Baroque style.
An intentional, coordinated effort. It created some of the most dramatic and recognizable architecture in all of Italy. It was a statement of faith, of renewed authority, and it was heavily influenced by the Spanish aesthetic of the time.
And that aesthetic was reinforced by the government, by the Spanish viceroys.
The curriculum also notes the drama of Caravaggio's time in Sicily during this period. But linguistically, the impact of centuries of Spanish rule is profound. It left a distinct Spanish accent, not just in vocabulary, but in the actual syntax and sentence structure of modern Sicilian.
So as the historical section of the curriculum wraps up, Weeks 12 and 13 look outward and forward. Week 12 covers the Grand Tour.
Right, when wealthy Northern Europeans started discovering Sicily's classical ruins, and their drawings and their romantic descriptions completely shaped how the rest of Europe saw the island.
And then week 13 moves toward Italian unification. You're looking at early photography and this new tension between the native Sicilian language and the official standard Italian being imposed from the north.
Which is a tension that, still exists today.
And throughout this whole journey, the real value comes from applying the knowledge in those creative assignments. The weekly reflections are great. They make you focus on one surprising detail, not just summarize a chapter.
And the ultimate synthesis task, the one that ties it all together, is the linguistic map collage at the end of week 11.
That sounds intense. You have to take a single Sicilian town and visually represent all the language layers over 2,500 years.
Yeah, you have to find a way to show 5 distinct scripts or languages on one page.
Hmm.
Ancient Greek, Latin, Arabic, Spanish, and Sicilian or modern Italian.
Wow. Think about the amount of history you're forced to compress into one single image.
It's the perfect expression of the palimpsest. You can't understand the place today without seeing the Greek root, the Arab engineering, and the Spanish syntax all still active and visible.
And the whole 15-week journey culminates in the final capstone project, the Explorer's Portfolio.
It's a collection of your work on a theme you choose. It includes your own sketches, a handwritten reflective essay, and it ends with this powerful final page titled, "What Sicily Taught Me."
So the real takeaway from this whole curriculum is that it changes how you see the island.
Completely. You stop seeing it as just a place to visit. You start to see it as a living, breathing record of human history. Every ruin, every mosaic, every single unique word you hear is a piece of that story, and all the layers are visible at once.
That journey from tourist to historical detective really is the whole point. We've traced these layers of power and art, but let's end with a final provocative thought for you, the listener. If the main goal here is to trace the permanent linguistic changes, which period do you think left the most defining, lasting mark on how Sicilians speak today?
Was it Frederick II's court, which created the first literary Italian dialect and sort of legitimized the language from within? Or was it the centuries of political and administrative control by the Spanish viceroys, who introduced foreign structures from the outside? It forces you to weigh 2 very different kinds of cultural pressure, both acting on that deep, complex Sicilian palimpsest.